The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of a forgotten stretch along Route 47, casting long shadows that clawed at the edges of the rundown motel. Dust devils swirled lazily in the late afternoon heat, carrying the faint scent of wild sage and exhaust from passing semis. Inside the dimly lit lobby, the air was thick with the hum of an ancient air conditioner and the muffled sobs of a small boy huddled in the corner. He couldn't have been more than 8, his clothes torn and dirt-streaked, clutching a faded stuffed bear as if it were his only anchor to the world. His wide eyes darted toward the door every few seconds, fear etching lines on his young face that no child should bear. The boy, whose name was whispered later as Little Tommy, had stumbled into the motel not an hour before, collapsing against the check-in counter with a gasp that cut through the clerk's boredom like a knife. "They took her," he managed, his voice a fragile thread. "My sister. They took her." The words hung in the stale air, raw and desperate. The clerk, a weary woman named Rita, with lines of too many shifts etched into her skin, froze mid-sip from her coffee mug. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering uncertainly. "Who, honey? Who took her?" But Tommy only shook his head, tears carving clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. Outside, the world moved on, trucks rumbling by, oblivious, but inside a storm was brewing. The kind that starts with a whisper and ends in thunder. Rita glanced out the grimy window, her heart pounding with a mix of pity and dread. The motel sat on the outskirts of a nowhere town, the sort where secrets festered like open wounds. Tommy's sister, Lily, he'd mumbled once, his voice breaking, had been playing in the scrubby field behind their trailer just hours ago. Now, gone. Snatched by shadows, or so the boy believed. Rita reached for the phone to call the sheriff, her fingers trembling, but the line crackled with static, as if the desert itself conspired to silence them. The boy's cries grew softer, more defeated, until they were just ragged breaths. Indignation burned in Rita's chest. This wasn't right, not in a world that still pretended to care about the innocent. That's when the rumble started. Low at first, like distant thunder rolling in from the horizon, vibrating through the floorboards and into the bones of everyone inside. Rita straightened, peering out the window as the ground seemed to tremble. Headlights pierced the fading light, a convoy of chrome and leather slicing through the dusk. Motorcycles, dozens of them, engines snarling in unison as they pulled up in a precise arc around the motel lot. 70 strong they were, veterans of the road, their jackets patched with symbols of an unbreakable bond. The Iron Oath, a club forged in the fires of old wars and older promises. At their head rode Ethan Hale, a man whose face bore the scars of battles long buried. His graying beard, framing eyes that had seen too much loss. Ethan killed his engine first, the silence that followed amplifying the boy's whimpers. He dismounted with the ease of someone who'd spent decades chasing horizons, his boots crunching on the gravel. The others followed suit, a wall of quiet strength forming without a word. Ethan had been riding solo that day, nursing ghosts from a promise made 20 years ago under a blood-red sky in some forgotten desert skirmish. A brother's dying words. "Watch over the lost ones, Ethan. Keep the oath." He'd drifted since, leading the Iron Oath not for glory, but for redemption, the kind that came from honoring what the world had tried to erase. Today, that pull had tugged him off course, toward this speck on the map, as if fate itself had revved his throttle. He pushed open the motel door, the bell jingling like a warning. Rita stepped back instinctively, but Ethan's gaze softened when it landed on Tommy. "Heard the kid from the road," Ethan said, his voice gravel-rough but steady, like the hum of a well-tuned bike. He knelt to Tommy's level, not crowding, just present. "Tell me what happened, son, from the start." Tommy looked up, surprise flickering through his fear. Strangers in leather weren't saviors in his world. They were storms. But something in Ethan's eyes, a quiet honor untouched by the cynicism of the road, made him speak. Men in a black truck. They grabbed Lily, said she was theirs now. I hid. But they said they'd come back. Ethan's jaw tightened, the weight of that old promise stirring like embers in his chest. He didn't need details to know the rot that bred such darkness. Corruption that hid behind badges or boardroom suits, preying on the vulnerable. Around him, his crew waited, engines off but ready, a family chosen in the crucible of loyalty. One rider, a burly veteran named Marcus, with tattoos mapping old wounds, nodded silently. They'd all carried losses, brothers gone, homes shattered. This wasn't just a stop, it was a call to the oath. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples, Ethan placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "We're getting her back," he said, the words a vow etched in steel. The boy nodded, clutching his bear tighter, a spark of hope igniting in the dim lobby. Outside, the bikers formed a perimeter, their presence a shield against the encroaching night. Rita watched from the window, her call to the sheriff forgotten for now. This wasn't law's domain anymore. It was the realm of promises kept, where justice wore leather and rode on two wheels. Word spread like wildfire through the convoy, radios crackling with terse updates. Ethan pieced together Tommy's fragmented story. The black truck, unmarked and menacing, had veered off the highway earlier that day. Lily, just 12, with dreams bigger than their trailer park life, had been the target. Whispers of a ring operating in the shadows, snatching kids for reasons that twisted the gut, trafficking masked as opportunity, corruption seeping from city halls to backroad deals. Ethan's mind raced back to his own scars. A sister lost to similar shadows in his youth, a promise to his dying comrade that had kept him riding ever since. He wouldn't let history repeat. The crew mobilized with the precision of old drills. Marcus scouted the perimeter, his eyes scanning for tire tracks in the dust. Another, a sharp-eyed woman named Kara, who'd patched more wounds than most doctors, knelt beside Tommy, offering water and quiet reassurance. "You're safe now, kid. We've got your back." The air filled with the scent of cooling engines and anticipation, the desert wind whispering secrets through the sagebrush. Ethan stepped outside, surveying the block they'd surrounded, not aggressively but unyieldingly, a living barrier against whatever darkness lurked. As stars began to prick the velvet sky, Ethan fired up his bike again, the roar a declaration. "We ride at first light," he told his crew, voices murmuring agreement. Tommy watched from the doorway, the terror in his eyes easing into something like trust. This intervention, born of a whisper, was weaving threads of fate tighter. 70 bikers bound by an iron promise, ready to chase justice through the night. Little did they know, this ride would unearth secrets that tested every vow, forcing Ethan to confront the shadows of his past while forging a path to redemption for them all. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, like a hesitant promise, painting the desert in strokes of pale gold and lingering shadow. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp tang of dew-kissed sage and the faint metallic bite of idling engines. Ethan's Iron Oath crew had held their vigil through the night, a ring of leather-clad guardians encircling the motel and the dusty block beyond. No one had slept much. Instead, they'd shared stories in low murmurs around flickering camp lanterns, tales of old rides and harder losses that bound them tighter than blood. Tommy, tucked into a makeshift bed in one of the motel's spare rooms, had finally drifted off under Kara's watchful eye, his small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of uneasy dreams. Ethan stood at the edge of the lot, his calloused hands wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee from Rita's pot. The motel clerk had become an unlikely ally overnight, her initial wariness melting into quiet resolve as she pieced together fragments from local gossip. "There's talk of a crew running things out of an old warehouse on the edge of town," she'd said earlier, her voice hushed as if the walls might listen. Folks disappear, and no one asks questions. Sheriff's office turns a blind eye. Rumors say they're in on it. Ethan's jaw had set like concrete at that, the weight of institutional betrayal stirring the embers of his old rage. He'd seen it before, in war zones and border towns alike. Power corrupted, preying on the weak while the innocent paid the price. Now, as the sun edged higher, Ethan scanned the horizon. The black truck Tommy described haunted his thoughts, a ghost vehicle with no plates, no mercy. He'd radioed ahead to a network of contacts, old war buddies scattered across the state, their voices crackling with the same unyielding loyalty that defined the oath. Got eyes on a similar rig heading east on 47 last night, one had reported. Coordinates flickering across Ethan's battered phone screen. It wasn't much, but it was a thread to pull. He glanced back at the motel, where Marcus was already revving his bike, the deep growl echoing off the faded siding. The big man, with his salt and pepper beard and arms like forged iron, clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We pull this off. It's more than a rescue. It's setting things right. For the kid, for Lily, for all of us carrying ghosts." The crew assembled with practiced efficiency. 70 strong, now swelled by a few late arrivals who'd caught wind of the call. Bikes lined up in formation, chrome gleaming under the rising light, exhaust pipes exhaling plumes of vapor into the cool air. Kara emerged from the motel, gently rousing Tommy. The boy rubbed his eyes, clutching his bear, but there was a new steadiness in his gaze. "Is she coming back?" he asked, voice small, but edged with hope. Kara knelt, her voice soft as worn leather. "We're bringing her home, Tommy. Ethan's word is iron." She helped him onto a spare helmet, securing it with care, then lifted him onto the back of her own bike. No child rode alone in their world, not on a mission like this. Ethan mounted his Harley, the familiar weight grounding him as he twisted the throttle for a test rev. The sound unified them, a symphony of resolve that drowned out the doubts whispering in his mind. His own past clawed at the edges, that long-ago night in the desert, sand stinging his eyes as he held his dying brother in arms. "Promise me, Ethan. Protect the ones who can't fight back. Keep the light burning." He'd buried that vow under miles of road, but Tommy's plea had unearthed it, raw and insistent. This ride wasn't just for Lily. It was his redemption, a chance to honor what time and loss had nearly stolen. They rolled out as one, a thunderous procession cutting through the awakening town. Dust billowed in their wake, tires humming over potholed streets, lined with sagging porches and curious stares. Rita waved from the motel steps, her face etched with a mix of fear and fierce pride. The convoy snaked toward the warehouse district, guided by those sketchy coordinates. Along the way, Ethan kept Tommy close in his thoughts, the boy's whisper fueling every mile. "They took my sister." Simple words, but they ignited a fire that no shadow could extinguish. As they crested a low rise, the warehouse came into view, a hulking relic of rusted metal and chain-link fences squatting on the outskirts like a forgotten beast. Smoke curled lazily from a side chimney, and a lone guard paced the perimeter, his silhouette sharp against the morning haze. Ethan's signal rippled through the ranks. Slow approach, no aggression. They fanned out, encircling the site with the same unyielding presence that had surrounded the motel. Engines cut one by one, leaving only the whisper of wind and the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead. Dismounting, Ethan led a small advance team. Marcus, Kara, and a wiry scout named Javier, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. They moved like shadows, boots silent on the gravel, the scent of oil and decay thickening the air. Peering through a gap in the fence, Ethan spotted the black truck, parked crookedly near a loading bay. His pulse quickened. This was real, the line between promise and peril blurring. Inside, muffled voices drifted out, harsh tones laced with urgency. "The girl's a fighter," one said, the words twisting Ethan's gut, "but we'll break her soon enough." Rage simmered, but Ethan reined it in, drawing on years of discipline. This wasn't about storming in, it was about justice, the kind that exposed rot without becoming it. He signaled Javier to circle for a better vantage, while Marcus covered their flank. Kara stayed back with the main group, keeping Tommy shielded in the throng of bikes. The boy peered out, his small hand gripping her jacket. "They're in there, aren't they?" Kara nodded, her voice a steady anchor. "And we're getting her out. Hold on, little one." Tensions coiled as minutes stretched. A side door creaked open and two figures emerged, rough men in nondescript clothes, scanning the surroundings with wary eyes. They froze at the sight of the bikers, a sea of determined faces under the relentless sun. One bolted back inside, shouting an alarm. Ethan stepped forward, hands visible, voice carrying clear and calm. "We're here for the girl, Lily. Hand her over, and no one gets hurt." The response was a tense standoff, the warehouse door slamming shut as reinforcements gathered within. But the oath held firm, an unbreakable wall of loyalty. From the shadows of his past, Ethan felt the old promise surge, a quiet force stronger than any engine. This moment, suspended between dawn and decision, tested everything: their bonds, their honor, the fragile hope of a lost sister. As the sun climbed higher, casting stark relief on the scene, the air hummed with unspoken vows. The ride had just begun, but already threads of fate were weaving toward a reckoning where redemption waited not in victory, but in the courage to stand true. The sun beat down mercilessly on the warehouse lot, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the edges of everything. Gravel crunched under boots as Ethan's advance team held position, the chain-link fence a flimsy barrier between them and the shadowed interior. The black truck sat like a predator at rest, its hood still warm to the touch from recent use, faint scuff marks on the side panel hinting at a hasty departure from the trailer park. Ethan's breath came steady, measured, but inside, the storm raged, an echo of that desert night 2 decades ago when promises were forged in the heat of loss. He could almost hear his comrade's final rasp. "Keep the oath, Ethan, for the ones left behind." Now that oath wrapped around Lily's unseen face, a 12-year-old's defiance trapped within those rusted walls. From the warehouse door, the 2 men who'd emerged earlier flanked a third figure, a wiry leader type, his shirt untucked and eyes darting like a cornered animal. He stepped forward a pace, hands raised in mock surrender. But his voice carried the oily confidence of someone used to bending rules. "You bikers lost? This ain't a tourist spot." The words hung in the thickening tension, met by the unyielding silence of the iron oath. 70 pairs of eyes watched from the perimeter, bikes forming an ironclad ring that no vehicle could breach. Marcus shifted beside Ethan, his massive frame a quiet threat, while Javier melted into the shadows of a nearby stack of crates, scouting for weak points without a sound. Ethan met the man's gaze, his own eyes steady as forged steel. "We're here for the girl, Lily, the one your truck took from her brother this morning." No accusation, just fact, delivered with the weight of truth that needed no embellishment. The leader's smirk faltered for a split second, long enough to betray the crack in his facade. Behind him, the door creaked wider, revealing glimpses of dim corridors lined with stacked boxes and flickering fluorescent lights. Muffled sounds drifted out, a child's sob, quickly stifled, twisting like a knife in Ethan's chest. Tommy, waiting back with Kara, had described Lily's laugh once, bright like wind chimes in the sage. Now, the light was dimmed, stolen by shadows that preyed on the unprotected. The standoff stretched, the desert wind whispering through the fence like an impatient spectator. The leader glanced back, signaling subtly to unseen allies inside. "You got the wrong idea, friend. No kids here, just business." But Ethan knew lies when he heard them. They'd haunted his nights since the war, when betrayal had cost him a piece of his soul. He took a step closer, boots deliberate on the parched earth, the scent of rust and stale oil rising around him. Business doesn't snatch sisters from playgrounds. Hand her over, and we walk. Keep playing games, and the sheriff gets a full report, along with every contact we've got from here to the border. A ripple of unease passed through the warehouse crew. The sheriff's name hung like a ghost. Rita's whispers from the motel painted him as part of the rot, turning blind eyes for a cut of the Shadow's profits. Ethan's mind flashed to his own scars, not the visible ones on his knuckles from bar fights long past, but the deeper cuts, a family fractured by similar corruption, a promise to protect that he'd failed once before. This time, redemption wasn't a distant horizon. It was here, in the sweat beading on his brow, in the loyal hum of engines idling behind him. Kara's voice crackled over the radio in his ear, soft but urgent. "Tommy's holding steady, but he's asking for you. Says to tell Lily he's waiting with his bear." That simple message fueled Ethan's resolve. He nodded to Marcus, who moved like a slow avalanche, positioning himself to block any escape route. Javier's whisper followed. Side entrance unguarded. Two inside, distracted. The plan formed in glances and gestures, years of road-honed trust speaking louder than words. No one in the oath rushed to violence. Their justice was measured, poetic, a stand against the cynicism that eroded souls. The leader barked an order, and the door slammed open fully, 4 more men spilling out, makeshift weapons glinting in the sunlight. Tension coiled tighter, the air electric with unspoken threats. But Ethan raised a hand, halting his crew. "This ends now," he called, voice carrying across the lot like a judge's gavel. "You think badges and backroom deals shield you? We're the oath that doesn't break." One of the newcomers hesitated, his face paling as recognition dawned. Perhaps he'd crossed paths with the Iron Oath before, heard tales of their unyielding pursuit. Inside, the sob sounded again, closer now, a fragile thread pulling at every heart in the encirclement. Ethan's pulse thrummed with the ethical fire of it all, not vengeance but restoration, pulling light from darkness without becoming it. The leader lunged for the truck keys on his belt, desperation cracking his composure. Chaos erupted in slow motion, the crunch of gravel as men scrambled, the roar of a single bike revving in warning from the perimeter. Marcus surged forward, grappling the nearest thug with controlled force, pinning him without a blow landed. Javier darted through the fence gap, a shadow slipping toward the side door. Ethan moved with them, boots pounding, the warehouse looming like a beast rousing from slumber. The scent of fear sweat mixed with the acrid tang of fear, the sun casting long shadows that danced across the scene like spectres of doubt. Bursting through the side entrance, Ethan and Javier found a dimly lit room stacked with crates, the air stale and heavy. There, in the corner, huddled on a threadbare mattress, was Lily. Her dark hair tangled, eyes wide with terror, but unbroken spirit flickering beneath. She scrambled back at first, then froze, recognition dawning from Tommy's descriptions. "You're... the bikers?" she whispered, voice hoarse from silence. Ethan knelt, hands open, his gravelly tone a lifeline. "Your brother's safe. We're taking you home." No time for more. Shouts echoed from the main hall, the standoff spilling inward. Outside, the oath held the line, Kara shielding Tommy as he strained to see. The boy clutched his bear, whispering, "Tell her I'm here." Marcus's deep voice boomed, diffusing the fray with sheer presence, while the leader's men faltered, outnumbered and outmatched by loyalty's quiet power. Ethan guided Lily out, her small hand trembling in his calloused grip, the weight of her trust a balm on old wounds. As they emerged into the blinding light, the crew parted like a sea, engines humming in approval. But the reckoning wasn't over. The leader, subdued but snarling, spat accusations from Marcus's hold. "You can't touch us. The law's on our side." Ethan's response was a calm stare, radio already crackling with a call to honest contacts, ones who'd bypass the corrupt veins of the system. This victory tasted of moral clarity, a promise fulfilled in the harsh glare of noon. Lily clung to Ethan's side, the family's fracture mending thread by thread. Yet, as the dust settled, Ethan sensed deeper shadows stirring, the ring's tendrils reaching further, testing the Oath's iron core. The ride home would demand more than miles. It would forge legacies in the fire of unyielding honor. The midday sun scorched the warehouse lot, turning the air into a furnace that baked the scent of hot metal and disturbed dust into every breath. Lily clung to Ethan's side, her small frame trembling, not from the heat but from the aftershocks of captivity, wide eyes scanning the sea of bikers as if expecting the shadows to reclaim her. Tommy broke free from Kara's gentle hold the moment he spotted her, barreling through the parted ranks with his stuffed bear trailing like a flag of victory. "Lily!" His cry cut through the tension, raw and joyous, as he crashed into her arms. The siblings embraced amid the gravel, a fragile reunion that silenced the murmurs of the crew. Ethan's chest tightened at the sight, the old promise echoing in his veins. Protect the lost ones, keep the light burning. This was its living proof, a thread of redemption woven from a boy's desperate whisper. But victory's glow faded quickly under the harsh glare. The subdued leader twisted in Marcus's iron grip, his face flushed with defiance and something darker, calculated spite. "You think this ends here? Call off your dogs, or the sheriff will bury you all." The words landed like gravel in a quiet engine, stirring unease among the Oath. Rita's motel whispers resurfaced in Ethan's mind. Corruption festering in the local badge. Deals struck in smoke-filled backrooms that shielded operations like this one. The sheriff's cruiser was already visible in the distance. Sirens silent, but lights flashing a warning approach. Dust plume rising like a serpent uncoiling. Javier slipped back from his scout, breath steady despite the sprint. "Backup's coming! 3 cars, armed! They're circling to cut us off." Ethan's jaw set, the weight of ethical fire pressing down. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a stand against the rot that poisoned justice from within. He glanced at Lily and Tommy, now shielded by Kara's protective stance, her hand on the boy's shoulder, a silent vow of the chosen family's embrace. No child deserved to be pawns in such games, their innocence bartered for power. "Mount up," Ethan commanded, his voice low thunder rolling through the ranks. The crew moved with fluid precision, engines coughing to life in a symphony that drowned out the approaching wail. 70 bikes formed a protective phalanx around the siblings, Kara securing Lily behind her, while Tommy rode pillion with Marcus, the big man's bulk a fortress on wheels. As the first cruiser crested the rise, Ethan led the breakout, throttling forward in a controlled surge that split the lot like a blade. Tires bit into the earth, kicking up clouds that veiled their escape, the scent of burning rubber mingling with the dry bite of sage. The sheriff's men fanned out, blocking the main road with aggressive swerves. But the Oath's numbers turned the tide, bikes weaving in a tactical dance honed from years of evading worse than county mounts. No shots fired, no reckless charges. This was justice's poetry, outmaneuvering corruption with sheer unyielding presence. Ethan's mind raced ahead, fragments of his past surfacing like ghosts in the side mirror, that desert oath sworn over a fallen brother's form, demanding he shield the vulnerable from systemic betrayal. He'd failed once, letting shadows claim his own kin. Not again. The chase spilled onto the open stretch of Route 47, the desert blurring into a haze of ochre and blue sky. Wind whipped through jackets, carrying the faint, clean tang of freedom as the convoy pulled ahead. Behind, the cruisers faltered, radios no doubt crackling with frustrated orders from a tainted command. Marcus's voice boomed over the intercom, laced with grim humor. "They're backing off. Sheriff's got cold feet." But Ethan knew better. This was merely a reprieve. Deeper tendrils of the ring lingered, whispers of a network spanning towns, preying on the forgotten. Lily's hushed words during the ride out replayed in his ears. They said more kids, hidden places, said no one would find us. Her voice, small but steel-edged, ignited a moral imperative that burned hotter than the sun on his leathers. They veered off the highway toward a hidden way station, an old oath outpost tucked in a canyon's shadow, a cluster of weathered cabins and a barn that smelled of aged timber and engine oil. The bikes filed in one by one, engines winding down to a collective sigh. Dust settled like a curtain falling on Act One, revealing the crew's faces etched with resolve and quiet exhaustion. Tommy and Lily sat together on a weathered bench, sharing the bear between them, their bond a beacon amid the uncertainty. Kara approached with water bottles, her movements motherly despite the scars mapping her arms from old missions. "You both did good holding on," she said, kneeling to their level. "That's family, sticking through the storm." Ethan dismounted last, his boots heavy on the packed earth as he surveyed the group. The air here was cooler, laced with the earthy whisper of hidden springs, a brief sanctuary before the next push. Marcus joined him, wiping sweat from his brow. "That sheriff's no ally. We need to expose him, get real eyes on this mess." Ethan nodded, the psychological weight settling deeper. Confronting institutional shadows meant risking everything. The oath's fragile peace, his own buried traumas. Yet the promise demanded it. Redemption, not in isolation, but in collective honor, actions silent but seismic. He pulled out his radio, tuning to a secure channel. "Calling in favors. Old contacts, clean badges. This ring ends today." As the sun arced toward afternoon, casting golden fingers through the canyon walls, the crew gathered around a makeshift fire pit. Stories flowed like the wind. Tales of past rides, losses turned to lessons, binding them tighter. Lily listened wide-eyed, Tommy leaning into her, the terror ebbing into tentative smiles. Ethan's gaze lingered on them, the siblings' reunion a mirror to his unresolved fractures. That long-ago failure the sister lost to similar darkness clawed at him now, demanding atonement. This path, fraught with ethical snares and looming threats, tested the iron of their vows. But in the chosen family's quiet strength he found the anchor, loyalty as legacy, justice as the road ahead. Radio static broke the moment, a trusted voice from afar confirming leads on the ring's safe houses. The standoff at the warehouse had rattled them, cracks forming in their facade. Ethan rose, the fire's warmth fading against the chill of purpose. "We ride again at dusk. For the kids. For the oath." Nods rippled through the group, a pact sealed in embers and starlight. Lily reached out, her small hand brushing his. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes holding a wisdom beyond her years. In that touch, Ethan felt the promise evolve, not just survival, but healing, the moral victory of standing unbroken against the tide. The canyon shadows lengthened, promising trials yet to unfold. Deeper corruption stirred, testing bonds and consciences alike. But the iron oath rolled on, engines ready, hearts forged in unyielding light. If this tale of quiet courage is stirring something in you, please hit that like button below. It helps spread these stories of honor and redemption to those who need them most. Dusk settled over the canyon like a velvet shroud, the sky bleeding into deep indigos streaked with the last embers of sunset. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the crisp bite of pine resin from the canyon walls and the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke from the fire pit. Lanterns flickered to life around the way station, casting warm pools of light on the gathered faces of the Iron Oath. 70 souls, weathered by road and resolve, sharing a meal of canned stew and hard bread passed hand to hand. Laughter mingled with low murmurs, a fragile normalcy amid the tension, as Tommy and Lily sat close by the flames, the stuffed bear propped between them, like a sentinel. Lily's fingers traced patterns in the dirt, her voice soft as she recounted fragments of her ordeal to Kara, who listened with the quiet intensity of someone who'd mended too many broken spirits. Ethan paced the edge of the circle, his silhouette sharp against the fading light, the weight of the radio in his pocket, a constant reminder of the threads pulling tighter. The call earlier had confirmed it. The ring's safe houses dotted the backroads like hidden veins, feeding a corruption that reached into city ledgers and quiet deals. The sheriff's retreat at the warehouse wasn't surrender. It was a regrouping, a shadow coiling for a strike. Ethan's mind wandered to the scars hidden beneath his jacket, not the faded ink of old tattoos, but the deeper etchings of failure. That desert promise, whispered over a comrade's fading breath, had been his compass through endless miles. Yet it mocked him now. How many lost ones had he failed to reach before this? Lily's trusting gaze earlier, her small hand in his, stirred the embers of doubt. Was this redemption, or just another loop on a road to nowhere? Marcus approached, his heavy steps crunching on the gravel, a map unfurled in his massive hands under the lantern's glow. Contacts say the sheriff's holed up at a roadside diner 10 miles east, meeting with the ring's moneyman. If we hit there clean, we expose the whole web. His voice was a low rumble, laced with the ethical fire that bound them all. No calls for vengeance, just the measured pursuit of truth, the kind that dismantled lies without shattering innocence. Ethan nodded, studying the faded lines on the paper, the scent of aged ink mingling with the night's chill. Javier, ever the scout, chimed in from the shadows, his lean frame coiled like a spring. I can slip in first, eyes only. Get proof without a stir. The plan wove together in nods and whispers, the chosen family's loyalty, a silent engine driving them forward. As stars pricked the vast canopy overhead, the crew prepared to ride once more. Bikes gleamed under moonlight, engines tuned to hushed readiness, the air humming with anticipation. Lily and Tommy were secured in the way station's safest cabin, under Kara's vigilant watch. Her own past, a tapestry of losses, turned to unbreakable guard. "Stay strong," she told them, her voice steady as canyon stone. "This ends with you both home, whole." Tommy clutched the bear, his eyes reflecting the fire's dance. "Tell Ethan, we're family now." The words landed like a vow, echoing the oath that had pulled Ethan from his solitary drift. He paused at the cabin door, meeting their gazes, the psychological pull of it all tightening in his chest. Redemption wasn't a solitary ride. It was this. Bonds forged in crisis, honoring promises that outlasted scars. The convoy slipped out under cover of night, a serpent of headlights snaking through the canyon's twists, tires whispering over packed earth. The wind carried the clean scent of night-blooming flowers, a brief mercy before the diner's neon sign loomed on the horizon, a flickering beacon in the void, promising coffee and lies. Ethan led the split formation, half circling wide to block exits, the rest easing into the lot with engines muted. The diner squatted like a tired sentinel, its windows steamed from late-night patrons. The aroma of grease and burnt toast wafting out. Through the glass, shadows moved. The sheriff, broad-shouldered and badge-polished, hunched over a booth with a slick-suited figure, papers exchanged under the table like forbidden sacraments. Javier dismounted first, melting into the tree line with the grace of smoke, his radio link a lifeline. Minutes stretched, tension coiling in the quiet hum of idling bikes. Ethan's grip tightened on his handlebars, the cool metal grounding him against the flood of memories. His sister's face, lost to similar shadows in a border town's underbelly, the promise to his dying friend a chain he'd nearly broken. Now confronting this sheriff, face of the corrupted authority, tested every fiber of his moral compass. Was justice served by exposure, or did it demand more? The radio crackled softly. Got eyes on docks, ledgers, names, rings tied to city funds, kids moved like cargo. Proof, tangible as the dust on his boots, enough to shatter the facade. But the night shattered first. A back door banged open, the sheriff's deputies spilling out with drawn lights and barked orders, spotting the encircling bikes too late. Chaos bloomed in flashes, headlights sweeping, engines revving in warning, no shots but a wall of presence that halted the advance. Ethan dismounted, striding forward with hands visible, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Sheriff, we know about the diner deals, the warehouse grabs. Hand over the ledgers, and this stays between roads, not courts." The man froze, his face paling under the neon's harsh glow, the weight of exposure cracking his bluster. The suited man bolted for a side exit, only to find Marcus's unyielding frame blocking the path, a quiet giant demanding truth without a fist raised. Inside, patrons scattered, chairs scraping like startled echoes as Javier emerged from the shadows. Envelope in hand, evidence snatched in the phrase distraction. The sheriff's eyes darted, desperation etching lines deeper than years on the force. "You can't prove nothing. This town's mine." But Ethan stepped closer, the scent of stale coffee and fear thick between them. "It's the kids' town. Lily, Tommy, names you'll remember when real law comes calling." The psychological standoff held, the oaths ring unbreachable, loyalty's quiet power outshining badges tarnished by greed. Deputies lowered their stances, murmurs of doubt rippling through their ranks. Not all were rotten, seeds of conscience stirring under the corruption's crust. As the evidence secured, Ethan signaled retreat, the crew mounting up with the precision of a withdrawing tide. Engines roared to life, a thunderous farewell that echoed off the diner's tin roof, carrying them back toward the canyon under starlit skies. The wind rushed cool against heated skin, the night's victory a bittersweet balm. Shadows exposed, but tendrils lingering in unseen corners. Ethan's thoughts turned inward, the promise evolving, redemption in the faces of the saved, honor in the stand against moral decay. Yet, as the way station lights winked into view, a final radio whisper hinted a deeper pursuit. The ring's head, a ghost from his past, waiting in the wings. Back at the cabins, Lily and Tommy rushed out, relief flooding their features at the sight of the returning convoy. Kara enveloped them in a hug, the fire pit's embers welcoming the weary. Ethan knelt before the siblings, the envelope heavy in his jacket. "It's unraveling," he said, voice gravel-soft. "Your whisper started it, Tommy. Kept a promise older than these roads." The boy nodded, eyes shining, as Lily squeezed his hand. In that circle of light, the chosen family stood unbroken, justice's poetry unfolding one ethical step at a time. But dawn would bring the final ride, where vows faced their truest test, forging legacies from the ashes of betrayal. Dawn broke over the canyon with a reluctant mercy, fingers of pale light piercing the mist that clung to the rocky walls like unspoken regrets. The air was sharp and clean, laced with the earthy dampness of dew and the lingering smoke from the night's fire, now reduced to grey ash scattered by the wind. At the way station, the iron oath stirred to life, bikes gleaming under the strengthening sun as the crew shook off the chill of pre-dawn hours. Ethan stood apart for a moment, staring into the horizon where Route 47 snaked like a vein toward the unknown. The envelope of evidence burned in his jacket pocket. Ledgers naming names, routes mapping the ring's hidden paths, proof that could topple the corruption if delivered to the right hands. But the radio's final whisper haunted him. The ring's head, Victor Kane, a spectre from Ethan's war-torn past, pulling strings from a fortified compound deeper in the desert. Kane, the man who'd once been an ally, twisted by greed into the architect of shadows that devoured the innocent. Ethan's scars itched under his shirt, Reminders of that long-ago betrayal in the sands, Kane's desertion during a raid, leaving brothers exposed, a promise shattered that Ethan had sworn to mend. Now, it converged here, the oath demanding he face the ghost, not with fury, but with the unyielding honor that had kept him riding. Marcus clapped a hand on his shoulder. The big man's presence, a grounding force amid the swirl of dust kicked up by early preparations. "Ends today," Marcus said, his voice a low anchor. "For the kids, for the road we've all bled on." Javier nodded from nearby, sharpening a knife more for ritual than need, his eyes sharp as the canyon's edges. Kara emerged from the cabin, Lily and Tommy trailing her. The siblings' faces pale but resolute, hands linked in a bond reforged by trial. "We're ready," Lily said softly, her voice carrying the quiet strength of survival. Tommy clutched his bear, adding, "Bring the others home too." Their words wove into Ethan's resolve, the chosen family's loyalty, a shield brighter than chrome. The convoy assembled under the rising sun, 70 engines humming in unison, exhaust plumes rising like signals to the heavens. No grand speeches, just the shared glance of veterans who knew the weight of what lay ahead. They rolled out in tight formation, tires humming over the uneven terrain, the desert awakening around them, sagebrush whispering secrets, hawks circling overhead as if bearing witness. The compound loomed after an hour's ride, a squat fortress of concrete and barbed wire nestled in a dry wash, camouflaged by scrub but betrayed by the glint of surveillance lenses. Kane's domain, Whispers said, held more than ledgers, hidden rooms where lost ones waited, echoes of Tommy's plea multiplied in the silence. Ethan signaled the split, Javier and a scout team to flank, the main force encircling with the precision of a closing noose. Engines cut to idles, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant murmur of voices from within, the faint cry that twisted like a blade. Dismounting, Ethan led the approach on foot, boots silent on the cracked earth, the air thickening with the metallic tang of chain link and the faint rot of neglect. Marcus covered his left, Kara his right, their steps a symphony of trust honed over miles. At the gate a lone guard emerged, rifle slung low, his posture crumbling at the sight of the wall of leather and determination. "State your business!" he barked, but his voice wavered, eyes flicking to the perimeter where bikes formed an unbreakable ring. Ethan stepped forward, hands open, the envelope visible in his grip. "Kane knows why we're here. The kids, the deals, time to end it clean." The guard hesitated, the ethical fracture visible in his stance. Perhaps a man pressed into shadows, conscience stirring like embers under ash. He radioed inside, the response a tense crackle, then stepped aside, gate creaking open like a confession. Inside, the compound unfolded in dim corridors lit by harsh bulbs, the air stale with dust and desperation. They moved as one, shadows navigating crates and locked doors, guided by Javier's whispered intel. Holding area, East Wing, 3 kids, signs of distress. Ethan's pulse thrummed with the moral tension of it all, the line between justice and intrusion blurring in the half-light. Kane's office door loomed at the end of the hall, heavy oak scarred by time, and Ethan pushed it open without knocking. There he sat, Victor Kane, older but unmistakable, silver threading his hair, eyes cold as desert nights, surrounded by monitors flickering with feeds of empty roads. Recognition flashed across his face, a ghost meeting its echo. "Hail," Kane said, voice smooth as oiled lies. "Still chasing oaths? This ain't your war anymore." Ethan placed the envelope on the desk, the thud echoing like finality. "It's every war. Lily, Tommy, their whisper started it. Yours ends it." Kane's smirk faded as shouts erupted from the East Wing, Marcus and Kara already freeing the hidden ones. 2 girls and a boy, no older than Lily, huddled with wide eyes and trembling limbs, vestiges of fear marking their faces, but spirits unbroken. No graphic chains, just the quiet extraction, hands extended in offer of safety. Cain lunged for a hidden alarm, but Javier was faster, pinning him with minimal force, the fight draining from the man like sand through fingers. "You think this buries me? The system's deeper than you know." Ethan's response was steady, the weight of redemption settling like dawn's light. "Not anymore. Clean badges are coming. Your ledgers seal it, for the lost ones we both swore to protect once." The extraction unfolded with poetic efficiency, the oath ferrying the children to waiting bikes, Kara wrapping them in spare jackets, her voice a soothing murmur amid the chaos. Lily and Tommy waited outside, their reunion with the newcomers a cascade of hugs and tears. The family's circle expanding in the harsh sunlight. Cain was bound for transport, not to vengeance, but to the light of true justice, his empire crumbling under the exposure. Ethan watched from the compound's edge, the desert wind carrying away the last echoes of cries, his past's ghost confronted and diminished. The promise, forged in blood and sand, fulfilled in this moment of quiet triumph, not through violence, but through the unyielding stand of honor against corruption's tide. As the convoy reformed, engines roaring to life under the midday blaze, the children rode pillion, secured in the embrace of chosen guardians. The road ahead stretched clear, leading to safe havens and honest authorities, the ring's shadows retreating like night before dawn. Ethan throttled forward, the vibration sinking with his heartbeat, scars fading into legacy. Tommy's whisper had ignited it all, weaving redemption from threads of loss, loyalty binding fractures into strength. In the rear view, the compound shrank, a relic defeated, while ahead the horizon promised healing, family chosen, promises eternal. The ride home blurred into hours of wind-whipped freedom, the desert yielding to greener edges, towns stirring with unaware life. At a neutral drop point, a quiet ranch run by old allies, the children were handed over gently, social threads activated to mend what shadows had torn. Lily and Tommy waved from the porch, faces alight with tentative futures, the bear a talisman of survival. Ethan lingered last, accepting a nod from the ranch hand. "Oath kept?" the man said simply. Ethan mounted up, the crew dispersing with handshakes and shared silences. Bonds deepened by the fire walked through. Back on the open road, solo now, Ethan felt the weight lift, the psychological chains of old failures dissolving in the rush of air. Redemption wasn't erasure, but integration. The promise lived in every mile, every stand against the dark. The iron oath rolled on, quieter but unbreakable, legacies etched in the dust of roads less traveled. If this journey of honor and quiet courage has reached your heart, thank you for riding along. Please subscribe for more stories of redemption and unbreakable bonds. We'd love to share the next chapter of the road with you.